What's up? We are going to have a conversation tonight, this brand new series called Twisted, where we essentially take ideas that get a little tangled and try to clarify for us, because often what ends up happening is we kind of get the big issues that exist out there. We get kind of big lies, but sometimes it's those that just have a little subtle truth to them that we find ourselves challenged to decode that. And I know you're pretty good at this because you got these everywhere. Like you're online and you see all kinds of ads coming at you, and you probably have a pretty strong filter for things that you know just aren't right? When it comes to political ads, and they're coming at you all the time. You're probably getting texts about them on the regular, and they say things, and you're like, I don't know. Maybe there's some truth to that, but I don't know. I think you probably have a really high sensitivity to that, and as do I. Like you probably see this when you're out and about. Maybe you see low food, nutrition. You see low fat. You see low calorie. You see zero sugar, and you're like, yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily still good for me. I mean, I see there's some benefit, but you're not fooled into believing that's good. And my favorite cereal is chocolate Lucky Charms. You ever had chocolate Lucky Charms before? It's unbelievable. Like, go find it wherever you need to get it. Walmart, perhaps, is the only place that legally can sell it. It's the best. But on the box itself, it says, made with whole grain oats for a balanced breakfast. Who are we kidding? We know full well there's no balance in that. It's not good for you. It tastes amazing. You should definitely eat it for breakfast when you want to, but it's not like good for you. Well, this weekend, I want to kind of unpack for us this idea, and it's a deeply theological concept. It's going to be a heavier concept. I know you're capable of hanging with me, but it's a concept that gets a little confusing, in particular for the Christian. This is confusing often for those that have already accepted Jesus. They're following Jesus currently. And then there's this little subtle idea that exists as we follow Jesus. If you're not a Jesus follower, this will also be kind of helpful for you, insightful for you as you're figuring out what it is that you believe. But this is within Christianity. This is the one we'll talk about this weekend. My sin is no big deal. My sin is no big deal. And why this can be a little confusing is because of maybe sermons you've heard or scriptures you've read or things you've thought as you've tried to understand the message of Jesus. You get ideas like in the book of John that God so loved the world. You get ideas in the book of Ephesians that is by grace we've been saved through faith. You get ideas in the book of Romans that there's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. And so you can hear something like that and there can be a little confusion. You're like, all right, okay. I thought that sin can do nothing to keep me from like Jesus. This is where it gets a little complicated. That's true when it comes to salvation. When it comes to like what happens after life, yes, when Jesus died on the cross, what he did for us, for those who accept his gift, is that takes the payment, the punishment for our sin and removes it. Jesus became that for us. He made it possible for us so that we can now have access to God, can be forgiven because of sin, because of his work on the cross. And so what we do then is we put our trust in that. We put our trust in Jesus and we believe in that. And so therefore, as we follow Jesus as Christians, after having been saved by Jesus, sin doesn't eliminate for us. You don't have to walk around every day wondering, am I saved today? Am I going to be saved tomorrow? You can have some assurance that because of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, his payment, ultimately, we get to go to heaven because of that. That's pretty clear. Where it gets a little bit convoluted, and hang with me, where it gets a little convoluted is that, yeah, but what about like regular life? Does sin matter in regular life? And it does. It most certainly does. And I want to spend some time kind of unpacking maybe how this all works, try to bring some clarity to you if you don't have any. And essentially, until we get heaven come down or until we die, sin really does play a factor into life, maybe more than we know, maybe more than we even lead on or led to believe. So today I want to kind of illustrate for you. I want to give you an illustration to help us visualize what sin does, kind of the way that it blocks God's best for us. I want to paint a picture for you as to how sin blocks God's best for us. To do that, I've asked a student to come out and hang with me. He's going to help illustrate rolling out this way. Make a little noise for Corey as he rolls out. Yeah, hey, why not? Stay here. Yeah, when I asked, you're pretty tall. I actually didn't know how tall you were when otherwise I probably would ask somebody else if that was the case. When I asked you, you actually didn't ask any questions. I just said, hey, will you come help me on stage? You're like, okay. Is that normal for you to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, risky. Yeah. That's risky for you. All right. So Corey, tell us what grade you're in, what school you go to.
Hi, my name's Corey. I'm a senior at St. Jose O'Connor High School.
Okay. Mixed audience. Mixed audience. Cool. Well, hang right here for a minute. I'm going to have you stand by this. And then watch your head for that thing. That was not a problem for me. It'll be a problem for you. So I want to illustrate for you this concept that when you decide that you're going to follow Jesus, when you make a decision that what Jesus did on the cross is what you want to identify with, when you put your confidence in that, you believe in your heart, you confess with your mouth, you repent of sin and you get baptized, you're saved. When that occurs, have a seat. It's as though you're kind of like you're in God's love. Okay? You're underneath God's love in this regard. Okay, so he's gonna hang there for a minute. And what we all know too is that there's nothing that you do when you're in God's love, when you're following Jesus, there's nothing that you do that changes God's love. It remains the same. It's immutable, unchangeable. It just is. And so based off of our behavior, God's love doesn't flicker. You know, it doesn't fade in and out based off of your behavior. It's constant. It's fixed. When we come under God's leadership, when we give our lives to Jesus, we're loved by him, and God's love just is. Make sense? But this is where things get a little bit convoluted because there are things that we do that block God's best for us. Things that we do. Let me just break down a couple of these. First, what happens is sin, when we sin, it blocks God's best for us. It dulls us to God's love. It dulls us to God's love. Check out Ephesians chapter 4. It says, they are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Who's them? These are people that actually don't believe in God. And he's pointing out that what ends up getting in the way is this sin that changes their understanding. It separates them from the life of God. It's a part of hardening their hearts, and we ought to be cautious of that. It says, having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they're full of greed. So it changes the sensitivity. It changes the way that we experience God. But I need you to let this sink in, that what sin does for us dulls us to God's love. It does not dull God's love. Are you with me on that? It dulls us to God's love. It gets in the way of our experience with God's love. So I'm gonna have you put on a shirt. Imagining that each one of these shirts is representative of a sin that we decide to put on. We're like, hey, we're gonna put this sin on. Like consciously, I'm gonna involve my life with greed. I'm not gonna care about sharing what I have. It's about the accumulation of my resources for my purposes, and I'm making that conscious decision. I'm just gonna fill my life with everything that I want. I'm gonna be greedy. Put on another shirt. You probably don't plan on living like this, but I know, I had it inside out. Let's do it this way. There we go. These are all from like my closet. So once again, I didn't realize that I thought there'd be like someone more my size, so. You probably don't make this conscious decision when, I know, stop working out, bro. You kind of stumble into this way of interacting with people that you begin to lie, and not just lie occasionally, you just sort of become a liar. You know it's wrong, but it's your teachers, it's your parents, it's your friends, it's anybody that you're interacting with online, and you like wear that, and that sort of becomes who you are. You wear that sin. Put on another shirt. This is getting tricky for you. You went double plaid. It's a good move. This one's not very confusing. I think we all get it. The problem is that even though Christians understand this, they still allow this to reside in their life. Sexual activity, sex and sexual activity with anybody that's not your spouse. Consciously choose to do this, knowing if you're a Christian, you're kind of living outside of what God has directly and clearly claimed for our lives, but we still wear that. And once again, you place these sins on your life. This is the way that you're interacting. It hasn't changed God's love for you, but it certainly desensitizes the experience that you have with God to the degree where you wear it long enough, you wear many of them, you get to a point where you actually stop sensing that God's present in your life. You start to wonder if he cares, if he loves, if he's there. Sin does this. Sin sort of confuses in that regard. You can remove those top layers. Sin dulls us to God's love. Secondly, it dupes us about truth. I love that word. You've been duped before? You try to buy something on Craigslist and just didn't work out. Try to get something on Amazon and whatever you thought it was like radically different than what actually showed up at your house. Been duped before. I've been duped. Been duped plenty of times. Sin dupes us to truth. Listen to 1 John. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. We claim we don't have sin, which is part of the lie here, is that, well, I mean, I do, but it's not that big of a deal, or I'm not even sure I have it. It's self-deception, and there's no truth in that. Put on another shirt. That's a good one. You decide that when it comes to Sunday nights, like Sunday nights are kind of holy and they're fine, but when it comes to Saturday night, you want to live entirely different for the Christian. Doesn't really matter. It's a drug, it's drinking, it's partying to the degree that you're okay with that. Like you're fine living this double life. It's not just the occasional mistake. This is something that you're saying, no, I'm gonna wear this. This is gonna be something that I'm fine experiencing in my life. You put on another one. For a lot of you, this has become almost just normative. Almost like it's so characteristic of the teen life today that cheating when it comes to school is okay. ChatGPT doesn't help that. But you find yourself cheating and living in this way where you're actually living kind of a lie in that regard. Can you put on another one? Let's try the jacket. Let's try the jacket. This is rough. Hey, I know this one's challenging for a lot of you. It's challenging because it's maybe been a part of your life for a really long time, but pornography, maybe it began before you knew who Jesus was. There you go, buddy. Maybe it's just gradually grown into a habit, but nonetheless, you're confident it's not right. Most of us, we know innately that we don't really want it to be a part of our lives, but we continue to wear it. We wear it and we sort of justify it because we're like, well, it's better than alternatives, I guess. Or, man, it's been a part of my life for such a long time. Or your intention is really to kick it. Like you don't want that to be there anymore, but it just continues to remain in you. You know what I'm talking about? When I was 10 years old, I began looking at and experiencing like all sorts of sexual activity on TV, and I watched porn from the time I was 10 until I was midway through teenage years. It just latched onto me. And there's this point where I realized, man, I don't have a lot of control with this anymore. If you find yourself duped about truth, you're stuck, and you don't sense like the right and wrongness anymore. That's a part of what goes on is you wear sin long enough. It actually confuses you to where you don't even know what truth is anymore. You're not even sure like who God is anymore. In fact, what ends up happening is it like blocks here's my lake hat. It blocks your ability to see. I didn't want to mess up your hair, sorry. When we engage in sin, it dupes us about truth and it confuses us. Like I'm not sure what truth is. I'm not sure who God is, and it confuses us. You can take that off. One more. First, it dulls us to God's love. Do you need help taking that off? Okay. I didn't realize this was going to be such a tricky thing here. Okay. There we go. Got it. You get the point. You're like getting the point, though. You're with me. Lastly, it dims our love for others. It dims our love for others. Check out Matthew. This is killer. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Anytime we have this heightened level, the more layers we have of sin in our life, it's like the opposite is true in us, that the love of others would grow cold. But why would that be the case? Why that would be the case is because sin actually kind of insulates us to the degree that we feel like we're fine. We actually believe we don't need God. But in reality, we radiate God's love. We're not the source of it, right? We absorb God's love and we share that with the world. That's the way this whole thing works. So when we are covered in and continue to find ourselves clothed in sin, go ahead and put another layer on if you can figure that out. Well, man, what ends up happening as we do that is we stop. This is hard. I know this is hard to grasp. It's hard for us to then radiate God's love because we've kind of been self-contained. We've not absorbed. We've not absorbed that. Judging others, hating, being selfish. So here's the question then is what does God call us to do? For the Christian, Romans 6 says, "Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We're those who have died to sin. How can we live it in any longer?" Hebrews says, "See to it, brothers and sisters," that's us, Christians, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage one another daily as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. What should we do if sin is a big deal, but what should we do about it? Something. Something is definitely a part of this answer. We should do something. Romans 6, "Therefore do not let sin reign in your mortal body so that you obey its evil desires." We should be removing it. We should be learning how, and this is a regular practice. This isn't a one-time thing like right as you're getting baptized or right when you're feeling really convicted and you just made a big mistake or right when you're at camp. You should be removing it. You should be learning how to take that sin off of your life. How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, Ephesians 4, "You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness." Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." We should remove sin. You should not feel this overwhelming like apprehension, like God's love is gonna change. The only thing that starts to really change when we start to remove God's love is that you experience it more fully. Experience His grace. Because sin blocks God's best for us. So is there anything going on in your mind right now? Is there any small, subtle, but yet intentional sin that you have remaining in your life that perhaps tonight's the night you'll decide, I need to take it off. I need to remove that. How do we do that? Well, you involve God in that process and you ask God for help. And in some cases, you involve other people and you confess that to a friend or a family member or maybe a coach if there's something there. Because if you keep it secret, it usually doesn't go away. Tonight in groups, I'm hoping that you'll have an honest opportunity to share about that. But I know that there's some of you, and I don't want to leave this kind of off of the table, that there's some of you that are still undecided about Jesus, and maybe perhaps tonight is a night where you've decided, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to give Jesus my life. He can take my sin. He can help me throughout life, and so I don't continue to have this experience where it's up and down in my faith, which, by the way, some of you might have maybe thought this. You're like, sometimes I don't feel like God's present with me. I don't feel His love, and I don't know if I have a lot of sin in my life. That's life. Like, that's the journey too. Hey, your feelings are gonna lie to you. Doesn't change the reality of God's love for you though, right? Sometimes we just don't feel like God's around. Sometimes we don't feel like God loves us. We just continue to lean into him and allow his presence to be felt at times. But that's not something that's going to be all the time. So tonight, if that's you, if that's someone on any of our campuses that's decided, I'm ready to give my life to Jesus, you talk to your coach. Don't keep it a secret. Don't keep it quiet. Talk to your coach and let them know this is something you want to do. But for everybody else, as we go to groups tonight, that we'd begin thinking through our own life, not somebody else's, not like the kid next to you, like he's got a lot of layers to take off, Not that. It's about your life. Any sin that's existing in your life that needs to be removed. Let me pray for you, that you be courageous. Father, thank you for our night. Thanks for students. Thanks for your grace. Man, we all need it. I need it. God, I know we have things that keep us from the life that you called us to. Help us to be aware of that. Help us to push through that, to bring that to you, to change. We love you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.